And I'll tell you a story. When I was a boy, I don't know, 15, 16, that area, my father remarried to an Italian American woman named Mary Socosio Sipi. She had two last names. Uh, Her family came from Italy to Argentina to somehow Rhode Island. Rhode Island has a huge Italian population, Portuguese population. So he remarried this woman and moved up there. He was older at that point. And I followed him. And my brothers and sisters stayed down in Connecticut. So I lived there and then I broke off. I just quit school and I just sort of a wild child running around. I made friends with this guy, Kevin, who I'm still friends with, who was just wild. You know what I mean? Just crazy. Um, I I love him. He's a brother, but I should have. Anyway, we did a lot of weird, crazy stuff we shouldn't have done, and I don't know how we're not either dead or in jail, but for life. But anyway, this was the neighborhood we lived in. It's called Norwood neighborhood. In order to get into our little patch there, which was mostly Irish American people, I don't know how that came to be, but it was one way in and one way out, one street. And at the corner of that street, downstairs was was a cement building. Downstairs a two door garage, industrial garage. And Raymond Patriarca's guys. Raymond Patriarca was the boss at that time. This is again, I don't know, I forgot, it's 71, maybe 70, 71. Um, now this is my understanding that the guys who worked there worked for his son. So again, what do I know? But they were there all day, and in the nice weather, they'd sit out in the lawn chairs, right? And the doors were always closed behind them. And they'd have cookouts there. These were guys. I was very young, but I think they were like 20s, early 20s. They drove muscle cars, and they always got dressed up by our standard. We were working class people, so they're always kind of nice, not in suits or anything, but new clothes, shiny, very shiny clothes, bright colors. So they were there. They didn't bother anybody. Nobody bothered them. It turned out what they were doing was just a lot of things. They sold cigarettes out of there, and at some point, and apparently they were untaxed. But I was a kid, and it never dawned on me to look to see, nor did I care. I got free cigarettes and money, and everyone in the neighborhood at some point worked for these guys. So the reason they hired young guys is we had no criminal record. I learned that later on too. Anyway, they packed up our car with cigarettes, and we would go on a route they gave us. Like they'd say, "All right, you got Jamestown and Newport. Those are two places in Rhode Island." And I'd go down and fill the cigarette machines. They give you this leather bag. You put the money in. Um you told the bartender, whoever was there, I'm doing this and that, and then you leave. They paid out everybody. That wasn't your job. What you had to do was just collect the money, write down in a book what came from where, and at the end of the day, you gave it all to some guy who was in charge up in the garage. Turned out it was untaxed cigarettes, and they owned the they had the cigarette machines, but also they had, I don't you don't see them anymore, but a long time ago they were kind of shady. There were these vending machines that they put in. You don't see vending machines anymore, but they've had everything prophylactic. They were in men's rooms, in bathrooms. Combs, prophylactics, dirty playing cards. Well, but today's standards, they certainly weren't. Everything was like the woman's breasts were blacked out. So you'd fill them. They had that going on. The cigarettes, I understand, were stolen. So like it was just pure profit for these guys. I also found out that across the street, I only worked for them for half a summer or something, but across the street from where that was this. I'm not going to say the name because eh, why bother? There was a building still there, big factory, and on the second floor was this manufacturing place. You're not old enough, probably, you who are listening to this, but at one time, amazingly, there was a Jesus thing that hit America. There was a song about Jesus on popular radio, and Jesus Christ Superstar was a big thing. And they made, among other things, rings with Jesus' face on it. They were lead rings, and I worked there too. Everyone worked there, and so they had a form and you dipped it into the lead and it made the ring of Jesus and you cut it off. They made other rings, of course. These are things, they sold them at carnivals. They're cheap stuff. Um, Now I've learned that was a front. I'm learning all this from these guys. This other guy, Kevin, who was a real, mob gangster guy, well, associate hanger on, is an Irish American guy. Anyway, he died last year. Well, he and I got to know each other a lot better than we did. He married Kevin, my other friend Kevin's. A lot of Irish people named Kevin. He married her sister, and we were all close, But I never talked to him about that stuff. But as he was dying of cancer, we discussed a lot, and so that was he was telling me it was a front. They were doing a lot of stuff out of there, and one of the things they were doing, I don't know if this is a crime or going on anymore, but the money these guys got from all these, it was change. A pack of cigarettes was 50 cents. You toss in two quarters. It was 50 cents on purpose because you always had two quarters or something close to that. So anyway, all these coins, they went up to the manufacturing place across, like kitty corner from the white building where the patriarchal guys were, and they'd melt them down. And apparently, they stopped putting silver in metal. I don't know what else is bronze or whatever was in pennies, nickels, cents, quarters. They stopped it in 1972, but from the 1950s and 60s, the economy is still, I have quarters today in my pocket, I'm sure, from 20 years ago. It was still in circulation. So we'd get these things, they were sorted by this machine that, I don't know, somehow knew these things, and they'd melt it. And nobody really thought anything about it. I certainly didn't. It just thought it was another end of the factory. I dipped what was called a dipper. You put the models of the rings into the leather and flood it. And go. But, I don't know what those guys are doing down there. So I didn't. Something interesting is when they made these rings, they had like a round cheesecake thing. It was rubber, very thick. And they'd open it up and they'd bring it to the artist and he would cut in a picture of Jesus with his hand, freehand, or a butterfly or anything you wanted. Well, the guy who was doing it for us had been a lieutenant colonel in the Italian army of World War II. It wasn't, when I was a boy, World War II wasn't that long ago. And they captured him and a bunch of generals, higher ranking guys, and they brought him to Newport, Rhode Island, where there was a military installation. Today it's the Naval Coast Guard Academy. I don't know what it is, but there's a major station there. Nixon closed it because Rhode Island didn't vote for him, but it was there then. And all these guys who put it war, they spent it there, and they farmed them out during the war. They said, "What do you do?" And the guy said, "I'm an electrician." All right, go be an electrician. We're going to believe it or not, take you on your word. You'll go out and you'll come back at night, and you'll still be a prisoner of war. This guy was an artist, and a wonderful artist. I mean, he was amazing. I do a little art myself, and I've known many artists, but this guy was incredibly one hand, and zoop, he'd make a face of Jesus, or as I said, any design you wanted. And he was a lovely man, a little chubby guy. He was a lovely, lovely man, and he barely spoke English. Everybody who worked there, who owned the family, were Italian American guys, first generation. The boss was a nice man. He was, I don't know, again, you're hearing this from the memory of a kid who was 15, 16, I don't know, 50. He was very, very much in charge. People respected him, and heavy set, short guy. When he sat in his office all day and looked worried, but a nice man, a very decent man. He had a big family, and he had his two brothers working for them. There was the middle brother who, I don't know, he was what his point was. He was nothing memorable about him, but it was the younger brother who was this big goddamn guy, big, thick too. Not fat but thick, and I'm only 5'9", so he was like 6 something. And what he would do is only to the younger guys, he'd stop, hey you, or push you, or pretend he was looking for a fight. I was in an elevator, freight elevator with him, and he pulls out, believe it or not, a switchblade, a shiny switchblade, and he said, if you can take this from my hand, you can keep it. It was something he challenged me, and I was so mad. My problem was as a kid, as a hot-headed Mick. I mean, I couldn't let it go. You know what I mean? I would just go off, and it would last for days. Um, I'm not like that anymore. I've calmed down a great deal, a lot actually, and I worked on it. I worked on. It was a bad habit. I was violent, and I'm sorry for everyone think about it a lot. And I was violent and stupid. And, I had a lot of stuff going on. So it pissed me off. And I went to his brother and the older guy, and I said, "This is what happened." And he said, "Calm down, calm down." And he's holding my wrist and he's, "Calm down, just tell me." And I said, "All right, all right, all right, all right. Go." He gave me, "Go get a Coke and come back." He came back. We go back. We find his brother, and he says, "His brother, this is what John tells me. Did you do this?" "Yeah, but I was just kidding. Come on." I says, "You carrying a knife in this place? You what? Show me the knife." Takes it. He brother grabs the knife, puts it in his pocket. He says, "How stupid are you?" And yell, but and he really dressed him down like he was talking to the older brother, like he was talking to a baby. You know what I mean? Just, "What's the matter with you? This is a good kid. He shows up. You know how hard it is to get people to show up for this job. Knock it off." And at the end, he says, the older brother ran up and said, "You guys okay with each other now?" And I said, I didn't mean it, but I said, "Yeah, sure." And he said, "Yeah, oh yeah, yeah." The jerk off said he was, "Oh yeah, all right, shake and walk it off." So shake his hand. I'm thinking, "You punk." We're walking. The brother goes back to his office. You know what this little jerk did? He comes up to me. He goes, "Wait, you went to my brother, you little creep? Huh? What's the matter with you?" And I said, "F you. Let's just, I don't care how big you are." I was still half his age. I could put a whipping on him. I'd do some damage. You know what I'm saying? Now he wasn't carrying some knife, which I don't think he would have gone for anyway. But after that verbal beating he got from his brother, the guy didn't aggravate me so much. I saw him for what he was. He wasn't some mob guy. He was a little punk, the younger brother who couldn't control himself. Anyway, I've gone off too far on that story. So, in our neighborhood, down the street, um, there was this guy named Beny the Booster. Apparently, he had a real name. I had never known what it was. Kevin knew his real name. He was a French American Canadian. There's a lot of Canadian French people who come down and work around. He's American, but and he had this little dinky car. And in those days, small cars weren't common like they are now, where big cars were unusual. Everybody had a big car. I had an Imperial. I mean, you could hide like half of China in the back seat. It was huge. But he had a little car, which was odd for those days. And he would pull up into this empty field, and he'd set up camp. And he had a hatchback, which was a really new, big deal in those days. And he'd open the hatchback, and he'd put out picnic tables, and he'd put all the stuff. He had gone up to Providence, where they washed the cars for the old New Haven Railroad. That's gone now. It's Amtrak. They would wash the cars and do whatever they do up there. And of course, a fraction of the stuff was stolen. They'd steal. It's Rhode Island, for God's sake. They'd take something, whatever. And so one day, it was always on a weekend. He'd be there Saturday. He'd have like 4,000 can openers. I don't know. The next day, he'd have 2,000 scarves. Just weird things like. But it was whatever was in the box. They gave it to him, and he zipped off. And people would buy these things. I think the one time he took a wash was he had electric can openers, which were much bigger than they are today. But, they were rare. People didn't have electric can. We never had an electric. Why our parents were depression babies. They said, "Well, you need a machine to open a can. Use the thing, turn it yourself." So they're not going to buy a stupid electric can. And at the end, he was like giving these things away. Buy one for a penny, you take the other. Warwick at that time was kind of, like a lot of illegal stuff went on the level I was living. For regular, nice people, everyday people, of course, it wasn't like that. But he was. So the cops didn't pay a lot of attention to stuff. You know what I mean? Like, as long as you were quiet about it. It's when you were loud and caused a lot of problems, like anything with violence or stuff like that. They were cracking down. But otherwise, um, they let Benny the Booster go most of the time, once in a while. But what happened is this governor came in. I think his name was Noel, and he had been the mayor of the city. He really started cracking down because I don't know if you know anything about the so-called Irish wars that were going on in Boston. It was kind of spilling over into because Rhode Island. It was mostly taking place up in Boston, but Rhode Island was, but there was a lot of mob killings, and they shot one guy in a phone booth, and they blew up another guy. It was happening, and he started cracking down, and he had this task force of state policemen, and he started locking guys up. So one day, the guys who were in the white building, who were melting, were doing all kinds of bad guy stuff, uh, decided that the neighborhood has just calmed down a little bit, and everybody had to be a little bit more low key. I'll give you an example. Across the street from the white building where they hung out, some guy had taken over an old-fashioned, what we call triple deckers, houses with three floors of apartments on it. It was a big, big house, probably from 1900. And this guy, he was a small-time contractor. He went in and he ripped it all up and made it really nice, I gotta say. And one day he comes into work to finish his job, and all the fixtures are gone. The bathroom, kitchen stuff, toilets, bathtubs, it's all gone. And I know it was because my friend Kevin stole it in the middle of the night. Mhm. This guy's he can't afford this hit. This contractor, he doesn't have that kind of money. So he goes across the street. This is blah blah blah. He says this is happening, that happened. Um, those guys, the guys from the patriarchal guys, walked around the neighborhood and they stopped little kids on bikes and people walking. So listen, that place got disappeared last night. Everything has to reappear magically tonight. Now, how they knew it? Well, obviously somebody told them Kevin had done it. Kevin, by the way, was hiding out when word got that these guys were saying bring the stuff. He was hiding out upstairs in his mother's house. She lived across the street from my house. She rented to us. He wasn't coming out of there. And his mother was one tough little mick. I mean, not little. She was a big, big, big woman. No mob guys getting by her. I give you, really, honest to God, that's how tough she was. But he's hiding up there, and he returned it all. He didn't put it back right, but he put everything back, that he stole. So they were telling people to, let's not draw any attention here. And they went over to Beny the Booster, who's there on some Saturday. I wasn't there, but my understanding was, let me tell you something. Beny the Booster was a little guy. He had a small chest. It wasn't he didn't work out or anything. He didn't have any muscles. He was a small, short guy with black hair. He dressed in, I guess the best way to describe it is 70s disco thing, ridiculous bell bottoms. Anyway, they went to him and they said, look, and my understanding from a girl who was there said they were really nice, and they said, look, we understand, two guys, and they said, look, we understand you got to make a buck. There's no problem with that. That's fine. But right now, you have to go find another place. You can't be doing this here. It's a big country. Go someplace else. We just don't need the problem. You know. And he said, sure, of course, not a problem. Let me do it next weekend as well. I'll tell my customers where I'm going to go. I'll find someplace. Um, and I thought everything was going to be nice. Well, he came the next week. The week after that, the third week, he wasn't there. The fourth week, he shows up and he's doing it again. He's selling, vacuum cleaner. Word got out. He's there fifth, sixth. He just keeps showing up and doing this stuff. The cops are driving by. They're saying, "What's that? What do you got there?" And they started rousting him. Let me go back to my friend Kevin. This guy. There used to be a thing called, oh God, I can't remember. You put a disc in them. They were in your car, and you slid a music disc in them, and I've forgotten what they're called. And you played these tape players, I think they were called, and you played music, and everybody had them. Everybody had them, and you installed them yourself. So, like mine, if you touched it, it fell on the floor. Mechanical, I ain't. So Kevin made a living. Well, there's no nice way to say stealing these things, and he was reselling. And to show you the crackdown by the police, they took him to the cops pulled him over. They said, "What do you got there?" They opened his trunk, and there's a whole trunk full of these. They took him to a place which was called Kafrida Farms. It was a big farm, I suppose, but full of trees, and they were big in the middle of a city, by the way. And they pulled him. They told him, "Go over there, follow us." And boy, they beat him to. Let me tell you something, man. Bad. I mean, they beat him bad. They busted his hands up, beat him with clubs. You know. What are you going to do? And those, well, today I guess somebody would have recorded it, but your choices are they can put you in the can, which is called Rhode Island Correctional Rico or something. Bad place. You don't want you believe me, people. You don't want to end up there. Or you could take your beating and behave yourself for a while. He took the beating. Not that they gave him a choice, but that was the understanding. You take the beating, you don't go to jail. So it was really sad. I'd only seen one other person beaten that badly. Another mob story is a guy who worked for us named Jim McGowan. Worked for my father. My father was a house painter. I loved Jim. He was a great guy. He looked like, um, if you ever saw Robert Redford in, anyway, he kind of looked like a Robert Redford with that mustache and all that. And he he was married to some capo's daughter, pretty high up. But like he couldn't keep it in his pants. I mean, he had more girlfriends, this guy. And they would come to our workplace and they'd throw stuff at. Oh my God. I guess I don't know what to do. I don't know. I went to get him one morning and knock on the door, and he was a mess, man. I don't know if you've ever seen a human being that's been beaten, but it's not like you see on TV. Every inch of his face was swollen, and I don't know how he could see. Uh, They had hurt him so he couldn't swallow very hard. He kept choking. They did something to him there. Um, it was bad. I feel sad for that. Jim McGowan's died since, but he was a really good guy who got into adventures. I used to hang out with people who did dumb adventurous things. So I'm not gonna say what I did. I mean, I was no saint either. Honest to God, but you change. You grow up. You know. So they beat poor Jimmy, but McGowan. Anyway, Kevin got beaten up, and uh, the neighborhood was changing. One day, uh, Benny the Booster is selling stuff, and they came to him and they said, "What are you doing? We've told you you're back here week after week. What's going on?" So, well, it's the summer. I only got so many months, and blah blah. Blah. I can't believe the chutzpah on this guy, the testicles on this guy. He's arguing. So they said, "Look, knock it off. We don't need stop what you're doing." He didn't stop. Um, they came anyway. They came back at the end of his when he was closing up shop. They must have been watching him, and they beat him on his legs. They didn't punch him or anything because I think because he was so small that had they could have killed him easily. Um, they were big. These are big guys. That's what I mean. Not but strong. Muscular. And I think the theory was if you punch him in the head, God knows what he might explode or something. So they worked him over on his legs with bats and sticks and kicked him. And never, that was the end of him. Never saw him again after that. I learned later on that all about him. And believe it or not, he ended up as a fairly successful insurance executive. Can you imagine that? I mean, who knows? Tell you one last thing. There was also a guy in the neighborhood named Sullivan, who I told you I had two friends. My friend Crazy Kevin, who was my age, and then there was the other Kevin who just died, who was a real serious bad guy. He worked, by the way, at the train station, washing. Technically, he worked washing the cars, and so that who knows what the relation there was. But you know what I mean for the stuff that got stolen. I never asked him, but Kevin worked. Sullivan was his leader. I don't know what the deal was. They were doing a lot of bad guy shit. Believe me, like disappearing cars. Setting. They take a car and drive it into the ocean or set it on fire. Did a lot of best. Like if you go to a little island called Jamestown Island, if you could go down under, it's between Rhode Island and Newport. You could send a submarine down there. There's a lot of cars not there anymore, or down there anymore. So there's a big cliff. They just throw it off the cliff. These guys were nuts. They did a lot of bad guy stuff, but I think also they hit people. They hurt people for a living. I mean, tough characters. Sullivan scared me because he was, aside from being enormous, he was, I don't think he was normal, honest to God. I think he was just, there was something wrong with that boy. And even now I said that, I'm a little afraid. I said, but he's dead, thank God. So he was a scary guy, you know. And did you ever hear the expression, he was looking for the insult in every word? He was one of those guys. And I saw him go off on people and so forth. But he was like our local mob associated guy. If you needed one, that's who you went to. But nobody did because he was nuts. And he hung out at this bowling alley. Um, there was a priest from a nearby church, another Irish guy, who was also the police chaplain, right? And he like led a raid on this place. We used to hang out at a place called Gatsby Point. Across the street from, there's an actor now, Woods, I think his name is, Richard Woods, or whatever that guy, that actor's name. He's from Rhode Island. This is near his house. So we'd all go down there at night, and we'd get drunk and busted. Not every night, obviously. The weekends, you get drunk, have a fire. It was really nice. It's in a bay, Ocean Bay. We'd have a big bonfire, which apparently you're not supposed to do. Everybody get drunk. There were people getting high, smoke dope. In those days, honestly, a lot of people were smoking dope. Doesn't make it right, but they were. So this priest, I don't know what this guy's problem was. He leads he didn't lead the raid, but he was with the raid by the U.S. Park Police and the local police and the state police. And they're locking people up. And they locked me up, and the cop put me in the back, right? But he had left the other side door open. So I just went out the side door and went into the woods. But anyway, Kevin found out what he did, this priest, and this is a terrible thing. You shouldn't hit a priest, but boy, he worked that guy over pretty good. I mean, he didn't. Damn it, I think he just gave him a couple of shots to the head or something. Told him, knock it off, go be a priest. What the hell's the matter with you? I mean, it's just like you find out. You know what I mean? I thought he'd die in a flurry of bullets coming out of a bank, but no, he didn't. He died as a maintenance man. Isn't that something? Anyway, that's that story.